In a fit of boredom the other night, I set up my lights outside the kitchen window, trying to emulate some moonlight. And while these shots didn't turn out too well, I figured with a little more effort they could. And so I returned the next night to try again. Here's what happened. Due to some location restraints, the light could only really be coming in from one angle, and so I decided to flip the camera around so I could backlight the subject as opposed to front lighting them, and I figured that would be more flattering. I had a very basic idea. I wanted a character kind of wistfully staring out of that window, and I knew the moonlight would be a huge part of that, so I turned off all except for one house light. I hadn't really planned on using it, but I think it provided a really nice kind of soft fill that would contrast the blue moonlight. I then went to the balcony just outside that window and set up my spotlight. This was an aperture 200D with a reflector dish, and on top of that I hung a CTB just to cool it down a little bit. I didn't want the moonlight to be unnaturally blue, but I did want it to contrast with warmer lights inside, and I think ultimately it sells the moonlight effect a little better. You can tell just by the light it's throwing on the side of the building that it's a bit too harsh, and so I decided to move it back and actually hang up a shower curtain I bought at the hardware store for like $10. It worked great. Hung it up on the edge of this awning and just made sure to move the light accordingly to make sure it was shining through it properly. When I went back inside to check it out, I decided it was still a little bit hard, and so I went back outside and doubled up the curtain on itself, doubling the amount of diffusion. And I think it did a good job. It's still a bit hard, but I think as a rim light I like that. Now that I had my two main light sources, I kind of moved on to making the set a little more interesting. I decided that my shot would incorporate a candle, and so I found one that was bright enough. I don't think it does much to me as a subject, but I think it adds a bit of depth to the scene. I then turned on this lamp in the background, but it was immediately too bright and kind of spilling all over the place. So I wrapped it in some ND, I'm not totally sure what strength that was, it was just what I had, and then topped it off with some black foil, which did a good job of kind of containing it. And then it became more of an accent light to separate me from the background. Lastly, I just gave myself something to put my arms on, because it was a cooktop, and then I moved the camera like an inch, and I had my shot. I also decided in post that the letterbox actually worked totally fine even though I hadn't planned for them, and I think it added a bit of cinematic quality to it. The smoke is obviously a super cheesy way to show the backlight, but I just think it works really well. It looks cool and it adds some fun texture as well. This was nothing more than a bored person practicing their lighting, but I love seeing how other people light and how they solve lighting based problems, so hopefully this was in any way entertaining.